Okay. Can you see my camera?
Yep.
All right. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Do you want to introduce yourself for everybody?
Yeah, I'm Richard Hanania. I am on Twitter and Substack. I am a former academic. So I have a degree in political science and in law. I was going to be an academic, and then around 2020, I started writing publicly. I started writing for some publications. Eventually branched out on my own, and now I mostly do work on my own Substack and Twitter, of course.
What were you what you said you did political science. What were you trying to do like academically? Did you want to be like a professor or like some kind of researcher or
Yeah, that's the standard path in academia. So you go, you get your PhD, you get a fellowship, which I got, and then usually, if you're lucky, you go and you become a professor, and so you write papers and teach students, obviously. And I was at the postdoc stage around 2020 when I started sort of experimenting with writing on my own, and I wasn't really expecting it. It sort of took off, and I'm like, this is much better than academia. So I've been doing that ever since.
okay. Um hold on. I'm so sorry. One sec. My computer's driving me fucking crazy right now. Um
So I'll say I'm glad to be here while we're we're waiting. Everyone always reaches out to me and says, "You should talk to Destiny. You should talk to Destiny." So I'm glad we could finally make it happen.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how this goes. Okay. Um I'm actually going to lose my mind. Um Killing this other stream right here. We'll see if this helps. Hold on. Okay. Is it still laggy or is it no longer laggy, guys?
Am I laggy? It might be my camera if it's just me.
Nope, it is absolutely me. Um, it's been good for a bit. Oh, okay. Okay. We'll try this. Okay. Um, okay. I'm assuming it's fine. Okay. Resetting. You started working in academia. You you finished a whole PhD in political science,
Yeah.
and then you were going to okay. When you said you wanted to be a researcher, what was your like thesis over? What were you going to specialize in? What were you going to write about?
I did a lot of public opinion stuff. I did a lot of I did international relations was most of my focus. So I have a paper on Eisenhower and nuclear weapons. I have papers on international law.
Mm-hmm.
I did a bit of political psychology. I mean, I don't know if you've seen those papers. The liberals have these kind of personalities and conservatives have these kind of personalities. So I did a little bit of that. I did some law stuff too. So I was sort of that was sort of my area of expertise.
Wait, have you written a large article for? It was it the Atlantic or something else that talked about the differences between conservative personalities and liberal personalities? Or do you think this article was based on your paper?
I mean, there might have been some citation of one of my papers in one of those places, but no, I've never written an Atlantic. I wrote one article for the Atlantic when I was in law school, actually, like 12 years ago. It was about basketball. It was about NBA playoffs and whether teams that are behind tend to catch up in the second half of the game, and whether things that has relevance for whether you take someone out when they get into foul trouble and so forth. So that was my only Atlantic publication. So you might have seen me in other places, but the
Okay,
Atlantic,
gotcha.
no, not in the last like 12 years.
I feel like I remember reading an article about that, like differences in personalities and like different outlooks on life and everything. But maybe it was a broader paper, or not. Not I'm sorry, not even a paper, a broader article. Okay, you started working. How long? What was the length between your defending your thesis and then like quitting academia and saying, screw this, I want to go write independently only?
So I had my PhD. I got it in 2018. I had a fellowship from 2018 to 2020, and then yeah, it was about 2020, late 2020, when I started writing and it started taking off.
Okay. And then why'd you leave academia?
Because it sucks, it's boring, and it's hard to find a job. And uh, you could sort of only write these papers that are very narrow that no one reads. I mean, I was interested in sort of broader ideas than what academia sort of encouraged. So it's like, okay, you study this history of this country, or you study this question, and I was interested in like broader questions, like what makes the conservative movement tick, what makes the liberals tick, like what is the sort of trajectory of humanity when it comes to geopolitical conflict. And the academia doesn't encourage that work, and if you do that work, no one reads it anyway. And plus, I didn't want to be on college campuses and teach students and so forth. And so, just the fact that like my Substack started taking off, I took that as a hint. Like, okay, there's an audience for this. I don't have to, be a sort of a slave to this career path.
How would you describe roughly your political ideology right now?
I'm pretty much a libertarian slash classical liberal. I mean, I think that there's eccentricities and sort of some heterodox things in there. But if you assume what a libertarian would think on most issues, you'd be right most of the time.
If you had to broadly summarize what you felt like the politically effective left and the politically effective right looked like, so like the majority voter base constituents of the parties in the United States right now, if you had to summarize briefly what you felt like both of those parties kind of stood for or believed, or what was driving them, how would you describe them? Or it doesn't have to be briefly, I guess. I'm just curious what your take is.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very broad question, and I
Yeah.
tried to answer it in a broad way. I had an article a few years ago called "Liberals Read, Conservatives Watch TV," and it's based on some data showing that basically conservatives don't actually read newspapers. They get all their information from TV, radio, mostly. Now they didn't even pull internet memes and Twitter and so forth, but I think that's probably like as big a source as anything. Liberals, I would say, are like a kind of sort of intellectual community. I mean, it's sort of the natural home for people in American society who are just sort of unreflectingly, and I'm not, you saying that to insult them, because it's unreflecting on both sides, are just, they trust institutions, they consider themselves educated, they've made it in society. They think like if something's in the New York Times or it's in Nature, the scientific journal, like, that means something. A professor at Harvard means something. Like, these are experts. You should probably trust them, defer to their judgment when you have nothing else going on. And there's kind of like this intellectual dialectic, right? So like new issues pop up, like, oh, we should go like more left wing on economics. Oh, we should be accepting of LGBT and trans and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's liberalism. It's sort of the default for like a smart, educated person in America. Conservatism is, I think, people who just sort of don't fit into it for whatever reason. I mean, so some of them are just fundamentally religious, and they don't see like their worldview represented in government and in elite institutions. Some of them are just sort of cranky, or racist or homophobic, and so forth. Some of them are ideologically libertarian, which is which makes them sort of they have more in common sort of with the intellectuals of the left, but they're different because they have a different ideological worldview. And a lot of it is just sort of gut reaction to whatever the elites are doing. Right? We don't like immigration. We don't like these new rights for these different kinds of sexual minorities. And there is, like within conservatism, as there is within liberalism, this kind of intelligentsia that actually translates some of that into policy, and sometimes doesn't even translate the instincts of the masses into policy. It just sort of has its own policy that it sort of free rides on top of that. I mean, you see that with a lot of foreign policy stuff and a lot of economic issues on the right. So yeah, I mean, I think people should read. It's a 10,000 word
Mm-hmm.
article on this, where I go a little bit into like more details, and like you would expect conservatives to behave in this way in this situation. You would expect liberals in this way, but that's the broad theory. I mean, there's so much shit you could say on top of that, but I guess that's like the nutshell version.
Not to be too, I guess, like heavy-handed, but normatively, it kind of sounds like that sounds a lot more negative towards conservatism than than liberalism. Do you view like one of these as having like a closer tether to reality or the direction that you would want to see the United States go, or do you see both of them as kind of like pulling correctly and incorrectly in different directions in similar ways, or how do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, so people are sort of, I mean, they're sometimes confused by me, and I think that this is like gets to the heart of it because when you hear me describe conservatives and liberals, I seem friendlier to liberals, and in a way, I'm like liberal in the sense of like they're intellectuals, like they care about ideas, even if their ideas are wrong. I mean, I just, I'm on conservative Twitter, and all day it's like, oh, Biden's dead. Oh, my sources tell me he had a heart attack. Oh, my sources tell me that Michelle Obama's getting like they just these things that are just not connected to reality in any way. And so, I mean, that I do have sort of a dislike for the conservative movement in a way. I also like don't have any, affection for, the pro-life movement or these religious conservatives and these other ideas. At the same time, I just happen to think that for like, contingent sort of historical reasons, and in most countries it's not like this. Actually, in most countries, free market policies are not correlated with social conservatism. I have an article coming out on this on Monday. In most countries, if you're economically libertarian, you're more likely to be socially liberal, so you're more likely to be, pro-abortion rights and things like that. But in this country, it happens to be the case that the social conservatives and the people who want to restrict immigration are pro-market.
Just
And
so
I
I can
think
understand what you just said, are you saying that in other countries it's negatively correlated, or are you saying it's completely unrelated? Like, are you saying
it's
it,
some
in other
in some
countries?
places
Yeah, go ahead.
in some places it's unrelated, and in some places it's correlated in the opposite direction.
Okay, okay,
That's more common to be
okay.
correlated in the opposite direction than in the US. So there's a big paper that I'm going to cite in my article that has like 99 countries, like public opinion data, and like what's your opinion on the role of women, and what's your opinion on like abortion, and what's your opinion on immigration or something like that. And then it's like, okay, how like economically, like how big of a government do you want to help people? And yeah, in most places, like in Eastern Europe, it's like negative correlated. Like the people who are socially conservative tend to be wanting, they want more kind of a socialist kind of government. And so I think that I think these things that we call the right and left, they're not natural. I mean, they're not naturally correlated with one another. I mean, it's historically contingent. I happen to think the economic issues are more important. I mean, it would be, if it was a case where like one side wanted to like just exterminate everybody or something, I'd say, okay, this issue takes precedent. I mean, there could be issues that take precedence over that, but given like the narrow bounds of like what Americans debate, I think the conservative policies on economics are correct.
Gotcha. Um, before we dive, I guess, too deeply into it, so obviously you have a very contentious history. People always bring up the white nationalist or race realist stuff or whatever. Where do you stand on all of that, or I guess what is your explanation for this stuff? Because I'm sure it gets thrown at you a lot
Yeah,
on every go. Yeah.
this was like 15 years ago. I mean, I was writing like a lot of right-wing people. I got very online and I got into these ideas, and I was sort of reacting to wokeness, and I was reacting to leftism.
Hmm.
And I said some things. I was anonymous too, and when you're anonymous, I've become very anti-anonymity. And some people say, well, that's hypocritical, but my view is like, no, it brought out the worst in me, and it brings out the worst in you because you'll say anything. There's not a sense of you. You're like, I can leave this and I could have just had some, shits and giggles, and I could go on with my life.
Hmm.
Me, 10, 15 years later, I pop up and I'm writing publicly, and the stuff comes out. It's not, it's not good. It's not ideal. I'm not proud of that stuff. I mean, I don't believe in ethno nationalism. I thought of it at one point as like a counterweight to sort of left wing identity politics.
Hmm.
But then I came to see like, you don't fight this one thing that's shit with this other thing that's shit. It doesn't like balance. It just makes everything worse off. So I moved away from that, and I have a lot of writing the last 5 6 years. People can judge me on.
Do um do you feel like you have like a political group that you can identify with right now in the United States?
It's hard. I mean, not a mainstream group. I mean, I like the Colorado governor, Jared Polis. I mean, I like individual governors and politicians. But yeah, I mean, not really. I'm sort of alienated from both sides.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that okay, I'll ramble a little bit and you pick up wherever you want. One of the things that I think that's interesting about your Twitter account is I see you post sometimes, and I think initially I'd seen a couple posts, and it kind of just looked like the standard, kind of like the anti woke dipshit. There's like an archetype right now online. I'm sure you're aware of it, but it's the person who is like a centrist nonpartisan who just so happens to support Donald Trump and attack Joe Biden on literally every single possible
Yeah,
issue.
they're very concerned about the democracy and the
Yes.
Democratic Party.
Oh yes. Now they've become very, very,
the
very
voters.
concerned. Oh yeah, yeah. It's like yeah. And I saw a few tweets like that. I was like, okay, well, it's just another one of those people. And then obviously I've seen you tweeting, taking shots the other side, and then so I kind of like pay a little bit more attention. It's like, oh okay, it's very, very, very difficult to find online. The word now is influencers. It's what I use to describe myself. It's kind of cringy, but listen, I'm 35. We all use influencers now. But yeah, I guess like writers, YouTubers, or whatever, who seem to genuinely have kind of like their own point of view. Even if I disagree with parts of it or even large swaths of it, it's very hard to find people that don't just like fully fall into one particular camp. And yeah, I think my biggest frustration today is I feel like you have, the way that I summarize it is you have like these two extreme groups. You've got the far left and you've got the far right. But the far left in my mind, when I'm thinking of like the crazy progressives, represent a very, very, very small part of the overall voter base of the far left. Like they've got power in like school administrations, and that's about it. Like they have no power in Congress. The progressives disavow even the justice Dems now. They don't like Bernie Sanders or AOC anymore after the Israel stuff. And so that's like the far left, right? They exist on Twitter, they exist in schools, and that's about it. And then the far right, in my mind, is like 90% of the Republican Party right now are the people that support Donald Trump. And the frustrating part for me, I guess, is as much as I might not like things like trickle down economics, right? Like I might think that like, okay, well, this obsession with give more money to business owners and magically people will come out like this is stupid. I think that type of counterbalance to the other side where it's like 15 an hour, that's the start. We need 25 an hour. We need 50 an hour minimum wage. It's like, okay, well, this is very stupid. Like that type of like counterbalancing is important for like these two extreme sides to fight with each other. I feel like at this point, this sounds like very mean, but like I feel like conservatism is totally like just a waste of oxygen in the United States right now. Like there is nothing of value that anybody or the vast majority of like the Trump supporting movement brings to the table right now. Jesus fuck.
I mean, there's, I think I agree with a lot of that. So when you say far left and far right, like far left, I think that has a real definition. It's like, okay, these people, they have different views on Joe Biden is different from Ayanna Pressley on on Medicare or something like that. Okay, on the right, it's weird because it's 12 years ago, like there was a Tea Party thing, and it was actually about ideology. It was like this person spends too much, and we have to primary them, and like a bunch of people were knocked out in like primaries because there was an ideological fault line within the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Trump comes along, and what determines whether you are in good standing with the party is your loyalty to Trump. So like Liz Cheney, like Donald Trump Jr. will go online and be like, she's a warmonger. We don't want her in our party. They love Lindsey Graham. Okay, Lindsey Graham loves war just as much as Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
The only difference between these two people is that one kisses up to Trump and one does not. And some of these sort of economic, more leftist people on the right, like J.D. Vance, who says like nice things about labor unions, and like other people who are like the Freedom Caucus, who are more libertarian, they're okay with Trump too. If they say a word about Trump, that's it. You're canceled. And so it's not even right. I mean, Trump is like more moderate on some things. I'm not going to cut Social Security. I'm not going to cut Medicare, but I'm going to round up all the illegal immigrants. And so it's just non-intellectual. I mean, as like a person who's like smart and like wants to, in all humility, and who like reads and cares about ideas, it's like there's nothing here like to latch onto.
Yeah.
It's just a cult of personality behind one man.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not even that it's not intellectual, it's that there are no ideas. It's not policy based. Like Donald Trump could say almost anything tomorrow and people would follow it. Because like you said, like I'm describing him as far right, but you're correct. Like Donald Trump is not like the guy of like, we need to have unfettered, like free market capitalism, laissez-faire style. He's like, because he's talking about like crazy tariffs and like super protectionist policies. But then also like deregulation because
I mean, he purged like the pro-life plank from the Republican Party. Basically just said later, but he's the most moderate Republican and we've had, as a presidential candidate in 30, 40 years on abortion. I mean, it really is remarkable how centrist he is on a lot of these things. But he's far right. You're right. Just because it's sort of this attitude, it's this style, it's this cult, and you're right. There's just, I mean, when you say, they're a waste of oxygen, I understand. I mean, there's nothing there for like a smart person to latch onto. And it's terrible to see like, because my friends, they're often smart conservatives. They went to the best law schools or whatever. And they become MAGAs. I mean, their brains, and you probably see it with people on Twitter who've had success in business or whatever. I mean, they just become pure, January 6th was nothing. I mean, they start to become anti-vax. Just if you bring up any flaw of Trump or the conservative movement, they bring up Black Lives Matter. It's just a very sort of petty way to go through life, and sort of an inability to just treat ideas like on their own merits. Like
Yeah.
everything is just partisan warfare. And this is sort of what Trump the man has like. They were like this a little bit before. I mean, this was always a sort of instant conservatism, but Trump just I mean, just the man and the movement just sort of like fit just completely perfectly.
Yeah, the everything becoming politicized, like going to the gym is like right wing now, or like the fact that you have to have an opinion about every particular thing, and the fact that like people are so keen, and it does, like everything that I'm saying that happens on the right does happen. Like there's a flavor of it on the left, but it's got so much more extreme on the right to where like yeah, like anything that you could possibly describe. If I was talking about toxic masculinity, for instance, like toxic masculinity is an idea that's been understood basically forever. Like almost every single coming of age story is usually about a boy or a young man, realizing that like it's not all about him. It's the sports game where he learns to pass to his friend at the end who makes the winning shot. It's the guy who realizes that like, well, the evil coach is actually taking care of his sick dog. Like it's stuff like that. Like this is all the coming of it's in the Lion King, it's Simba realizing that he has to live for more than himself, right? But as soon as you use the word like toxic masculinity, now it's like whatever idea you were going to give, they're going to take the exact opposite position. And it's the same for every like social phenomenon, for every political phenomenon, right? Like if you bring up anything related to, like you said, like vaccines or COVID, the mind just completely disintegrates. And the reason why I say more particularly, the reason why I say I feel like it's a waste of oxygen, it's not because I don't like all the bad and stupid ideas. It's that it deprives of oxygen, I think, really good conversations. Like I think, man, there's so much interest in my mind about the COVID lockdowns in terms of like prospectively going back with what we had at the time. Did we make the best decisions? Retrospectively, what could we have done better? There are so many really good, rich conversations to mine there in economics and social policy, in federalism, like state versus federal government, but none of that conversation is happening. We can't have any conversation about that because we're talking about whether or not the neo-commie Marxists were trying to steal all of our businesses and lock us down forever with vaccine passports so that Bill Gates and George Soros could inject mRNA into us to change. I hate it. I absolutely fucking hate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean you're right, but I'll say maybe we should just think of why someone would sort of be so annoyed by liberals they might go in the opposite direction. So you bring up toxic masculinity, good example. I mean, it is like idea like masculinity sometimes is toxic. It causes war and it causes violence and people beating their wives and drunk driving and so forth.
Sure.
Okay, that's legitimate. You also have a lot of crazy people in academia. Now, when they do this thing, I find it sort of like, okay, can you define woman congressman? Like they should be able to define it. Like, don't give them this one thing where they say, okay, they can't define women. I'm going to just reject these people, completely, because that's how a lot of people end up on the right. They're like, oh, they can't tell me it's a woman. They tell me, if you're white, you're privileged, and if you're black, and if we arrest too many people in their one race. I mean, there's a lot of legitimate grievances here. They take it too far and they take it into a stupid direction, unfortunately. But I think there is a kind of a vicious cycle to these things.
Yeah, I agree that the sometimes like the over academianizing, that's not a word, but like people will have these arguments publicly where it's like, oh, well, actually, if you're black, you can't be racist to a white person. It's like, wait, really? I feel like anybody can be racist to anybody. Well, no, because racism is when you have an adequate amount of societal power and then you can institute this in a way. And it's like, okay, well, nobody uses racism like that. Like, why would you even have those clips of you saying you can't be racist towards white people? Because that it's just going to be a million people, calling white people slurs.
Like, you have to be so sensitive, right? They're the people of microaggressions. The left says, oh, you have to watch out for your dog whistles. You say this and that. And then they're just getting up there and saying, white privilege, toxic masculinity. And they're talking about men and they're not being careful with their language.
You stole that from me. Yes. No, that is 1,000,000,000% true. One of the really irritating fucking things about that is progressives. One of the complaints that I have, just lit up like 5 areas in my mind. One of the big complaints that I have is that people on the right, okay, for better or for worse, One of the things these motherfuckers should be good at is picking out conspiracy theories, because these fuckers see conspiracy fucking everywhere, okay? However, because of their political inclination, they can't talk about anything having to do with Russia or any type of like foreign intrusion in our social media. That's like obviously happened. Like nobody serious denies this, I don't think. That there's like a huge interest internationally in fucking with American media, but the right can't talk about it. And then on the left, these people should be the people that are the most specially equipped to talk about things like anti-Semitism or racism or whatever. But when it comes to criticizing non-white people about it, they can't say a word about it, right? So we had all this stuff about Charlottesville and, not letting the Nazis, kill Jews or whatever. But when people are literally celebrating Hamas, or when Kanye West is talking crazy shit about Jews, it's like, well, now the progressives are completely and totally fucking silent on it. And I
think the progressives are critical of Kanye West at this point.
They might be at this point. But at the time, there wasn't anywhere near the pushback. I don't even actually know. No, I don't think there was as much pushback against Ye as there was against like the Charlottesville stuff. I think that somebody emailed me this, and I think I agree. The pushback against Charlottesville wasn't because of the anti-Semitism; it was because of the white supremacy. People on the far left don't like white supremacy, and Nazis are white supremacists, but they don't care about the anti-Semitism as much. And if the anti-Semitism is coming from a minority, I don't think they have the same energy for it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's always right, and I think that, but it's an amplifier too. If the anti-Semitism is coming from the white nationalists, and it's like, okay, this is Hitler.
Then
it's coming from the left. It's sort of like, their heart's in the right place. They just want the Palestinians to be treated a little better. I think there's that kind of inclination. Although I will say, the anti-Semitism thing on the left, I mean, it exists. But conservatives really, I think, do overplay it. I mean, they had these hearings in Congress, and they would bring in these students, and they would say, I feel unsafe on college campuses. It's like, come on, guys, you guys were making fun of this. Like, someone could even yell at your face and say, I don't like Israel, I don't like Zionists. You're not unsafe. I mean, I think this is a sort of concept creep that conservatives have sort of played into lately.
Maybe, yeah, it's possible. Although, if you're a progressive, it's really hard to make that argument when you've been the party of microaggressions for 10 years. We are trying to say that somebody saying they prefer, straight hair to curly hair is something that makes black people feel super uncomfortable everywhere. Well, now all of a sudden, as a Jewish person, you're supposed to be okay with people saying, holding up the Houthi flag and then trying to explain to you how, well, actually, when they say death to America, death to Israel, and death to the Jews, that's not actually anti-Semitism. They're actually speaking about anti-colonialism there. Okay, and it's like, really? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to. I mean, like, this is like a thing where you can always point out others' hypocrisy. I mean, someone's got to break the cycle, and this is what I tell my conservative friends. It's like, you're going to point to this thing where they're hypocritical, they're going to point to this thing where you're hypocritical, but like, we go down that path. It doesn't take us anywhere good. Just be better. Just be better. It's probably going to be to your political advantage if you come across as like a normal person who is not that angry and who can sort of speak with nuance. Like, that's appealing to like people who are just sort of tired of politics and don't care about anything. But
I don't know if that's true. That's my issue. I think that's actually totally not true. I super disagree, and I wish I didn't. But
you think if JD, I was telling someone this example. What if JD Vance came out and gave a speech where he's like, I am outraged by all the sexist attacks on Kamala Harris. She is a good person who has been a faithful public servant for whatever 15 years. We're gonna debate the issues, and we're gonna have a good, clean election or some shit like that. Do you think that would be good politics for him or bad politics for him?
Horrible politics.
Really?
I don't think. I mean, like, let me ask you this question: what is Trump's policy platform?
Because so your idea is that it will actually make a policy. So the
there is no policy. Conservatives don't even have that. I think that's why we've been talking about like trans issues for like 3 fucking years. I think it's because conservatives have no policy platform. It's whatever Trump says, and it's like the social issues that are all kind of wrapped up in that.
Yeah, well, the way they would run it, and this is why they would be advantaged, because they would just say inflation, border. You're right. They wouldn't have like detailed policy proposals, but they would just say that stuff, and like people would say, "Oh, they're seeming moderate and high-minded." But this is Trump. This is not who Trump is. This is not who Vance is. And then like, "Oh, inflation. We don't like inflation. Therefore, Trump is going to be better on inflation." I mean, it's not going to be that sophisticated. On the policy thing, I mean, they did rewrite the platform to just make it whatever Trump says basically. There is sort of, but I do think there is a predictability to what the policy is going to be. So like if Trump gets in office, he's going to appoint the same judges that Ron DeSantis did. He's going to probably appoint many of the same people to the federal agencies. So I think they're going to try to cut taxes. They're going to try to do a corporate tax cut of the individual tax cuts, which are going to expire. So the campaign doesn't care about issues, but there is sort of a consistent policy direction you could predict if and when Trump wins.
A little bit, yeah. But this gets more into the intellectual side of things as well. Do you do like a lot of econ or any stuff like that?
A little bit. I mean, I do some economic analysis, sure.
Yeah, I think I guess like one of the issues there too is that I think people don't realize a lot of the times that what they're asking for I think is contradictory and they don't understand that. So for instance, like people will say things like if you're voting for Trump, then like I think these are four statements that are probably true. Is one, you support lower taxes, so you want tax rates to come down. Okay. Two is you are probably for the tariffs because fuck China and because Donald Trump wants the tariffs.
Yeah.
Three, you probably broadly support the idea of made in America. You want more American made stuff, no more foreign shit. But then fourth, one of your chief complaints are things like inflation. And all three of those prior things are probably going to make prices on everything go up. So you have like a lot of this like contradictory desire as well. And I don't even think people necessarily realize that they're asking for things that are mutually exclusive or like impossible with one another. So they support certain policies, but they don't even necessarily effect the answer they're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. So this is, this is also, you're right, but this is not this, in this case, it's not an exclusively Republican problem. I
For
have a
sure.
friend named Brian Rydell who writes about entitlements. And so Social Security and Medicare are going to a direction where in 10 years, you're going to have to either cut benefits, some combination of cutting benefits and raising taxes. Now, Biden, what he says, and Rydell has written New York Times op-eds criticizing him for this, is basically, I'm not going to raise the taxes of anyone working under something like 400,000 a year or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, and I'm going to preserve Social Security. Okay, literally impossible. Like we can look at the budget, we can look at the projections, and we can see that that's impossible. So you're right. Yeah, the public just wants things that are
Sure.
sort of contradictory, and both sides do it. I think if anyone was too, I don't think anyone should be too honest about politics. I think you should have a sort of, if you're just putting on my sort of political strategist hat, like you should be moderate in tone. But I don't think you should give people like the truth about policy because you'll be destroyed.
Maybe, sure, yeah. I think that's a problem though. Yeah. To give an example of the other side, people that complain about the unaffordability of like housing. So students want like all their student loan debt forgiven, but if that were to happen, then housing prices would increase even more because you now have like a ton of students that are in the market looking for houses with a lot more money. Um, how much do you think? I feel like something I've been paying more attention to over the past month is I really feel like social media is rotting the political brains of Americans. I remember hearing 7 or 8 years ago, I grew up very, very, very conservative. I'm like reading books by Sean Hannity and Michael Savage, just Savage Nation, and listening to all the talk radio guys, all the Rush
Yeah.
Limbaughs and all of the Glenn Becks and everybody. I followed Glenn Beck into the Tea Party movement and everything. I was a big Ron Paul guy in 2008.
Mm.
I was so happy, I think like 7 or 8 years ago, when my mom was like, I don't really watch Fox News anymore. I get my news from other areas because I thought she started to broaden her media digest. And I found out that it was just memes on Facebook.
I thought you were going to say it was Newsmax. There's a lot of them ditched off because they thought it wasn't hardcore enough.
Yeah, honestly, it probably is part Newsmax and OAN too. But yeah, holy fuck. There is like no shortage of, and I am alternative media, but my God, like alternative media trash that
You know,
people
one
can
thing
consume.
people don't talk. You know, one thing people don't talk about. Like the average viewer of like these cable news channel is like it's happening
80.
with the average. Yeah, it's something ridiculous. It's like a huge portion of these people just have dementia, right? And I would turn on Hannity sometimes, and it's like it's amazing. It's the same thing again, again. It's like, I was watching him like last year or something, and he was like still talking about Michelle Obama and still talking about Hillary Clinton, still talking about Kathy Griffin. And there was like it was like it could have been out of 2018, like
Mhm.
or 2015. It could have been literally the same show, right? And like, who does this appeal to? It's people with Alzheimer's who don't remember he was 2 years ago talking
Wow.
about Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama. So yeah, the gerontocracy is one of the things I've read about. People who think of it in terms of, oh, Biden and Trump are too old. That's right, but there's a lot of old people with a lot of money and a lot of political influence and who vote a lot and whose brains are not functioning all that well, and who are having a major impact on our politics.
Yeah, I see on Piers Morgan now, whenever he's debating on this Trump stuff, he's always bringing up like, oh, well, you think Trump is a fascist? Well, did you know that Obama deported more immigrants than any president? And it's like, bro, it's Obama's not running for president. It's been a long time, dog. Yeah, it's stupid. Um, what do you think is the future for? Oh, do you think that it matters if people have a factual understanding of the world?
Huh. Yeah, I mean, yes, it does matter. I think
Why?
it's
Why and
true.
how?
Well, I mean, it matters. It obviously affects their behavior, right? There's, I think it's maybe too much. Like the context is, the question assumes sort of the context where it's like possible for people to be have an accurate accurate view of the world. I think most people are not thinking about politics most of the time
Hmm.
and are probably not thinking about things too deeply. And so, like, for most people, I mean, it's, they would behave differently if they had an accurate understanding of the world. But it's probably too much to wish for like the majority, like 51% of the people or something to think like that. For policymakers, yeah, I mean, Putin invaded Ukraine. He apparently thought that he would be welcomed, that he thought that there was like these intelligence agents within the Ukrainian government who were like ready to like, take over and like give the country over to him. And obviously, if he had a realistic understanding of Ukraine and what the society was like, he would have behaved differently. So yeah, obviously.
Do you think for like individual citizens? Also, when I say accurate, I'm sure you've heard the phrase or the saying for like scientists that like every model is a lie. Like the goal of a model
Yeah.
isn't to tell you exactly what's going on; it's to give you an approximation. And as you study more and more deeply into a particular science, you'll get more and more accurate models. But a model is just a model. When I'm saying like understand society, I'm not saying that like a person needs to be able to explain to me like the relationship between like Federal Reserve quantitative easing policy and the impacts on it, whatever. I'm just saying like have like a broad understanding of how things work. I guess my question is pointing at the idea that I feel like people are becoming increasingly divorced from any type of reality, and that there are like these different like epistemic hells that we live in, to where if I ask people questions about a particular thing, we're not remotely in the same world anymore. You bring up Russia, Ukraine. So like Ukraine is either fuck, I'm trying to steel man like a bad faith left wing reading of it, but I don't even know one. I guess like in my world, like I would say like Ukraine is a sovereign state that was invaded in 2014, and then it increased in 2022 by another sovereign state for largely no reason, and there's now an ongoing war where Russia is trying to interfere with Ukraine's ability to have territory and be an autonomous country. And then on the other end, you've got Ukraine is a country that in 2014 was couped artificially by the U.S. government so that we continue to fund Nazis in Azov and biolaboratories with genetic diseases that are targeting ethnically Russian people and Americans, and like, holy shit. And Putin is like the savior of the West, and he's like based and stands for Christianity, against like the trans Ukrainian army. It's like holy shit. I feel like it's worse than it ever has been in terms of different
Yeah.
realities that we live in.
Let me give you an example of like why, yeah, exactly along the lines you're saying and why it matters. So, the vaccine when Operation Warp Speed, I mean, was I'm sure you agree is a great success. Trump tried to take credit for it at first, and we want to create the incentive structure where like we continue like pushing for vaccines for other diseases that might come down the line. Apparently, this has become very hard to do in Congress because Republicans don't acknowledge Operation Warp Speed as a success, and so will not fund it. And DeSantis actually, when he was trying to get to Trump's right on vaccines, like why he's being anti-vaccine on the right, but that was like, that's how they think. He like announced, I don't think anything ever came of this, but like he announced that like opening a criminal investigation into like Pfizer, just like the cheapest, like like who's gonna take the risk to develop something that's gonna potentially save a lot of lives, cost a lot of money, but has some risk. And so yeah, this is one example where like just false information just sort of melted people's brains and had serious public policy effects. Who knows? Well, maybe we'll have another COVID, we'll have another pandemic where it'll be 10 times worse, and we weren't as prepared as we could have been because of the anti-vax movement on the right. And so yeah, this is unfortunate. I mean, I think that it's like one good thing about these people is like they can only focus on a few things at a time. So it's like the right wing lunatics are like obsessed with vaccines and they're obsessed with Ukraine. Most people on the left and most people on the right, like who are like elites, like they go to work every day, they put on their pants, they go to a government office, they're running companies or they're being federal judges or they're working on campaigns. Those people I think to be more connected with reality than the masses are. That sort of that gap maybe is closing in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But still, so like, yes, it matters a lot. I mean, this misinformation, this sort of, sort of just proliferation of stupidity is really important for a lot of policy areas. At the same time, like, it doesn't mean we're going to like, devolve into anarchism. There's still, the society still functions and still has some checks on this.
I hope you're right on that. I think one of the concerns that I'm having is I feel like So like as much as people would say like, oh, Bush is a fascist and this is horrible and blah blah, and he did do some things that I would consider really bad. I haven't done like a deep dive into reading on it yet, but I'm still not entirely sure why we invaded Iraq. Like even from the Bush admin perspective, like I know that we use the weapons of mass destruction. Like, I don't even know what the foreign policy
Yeah. Oh, it's
goal.
confusing. Yeah, I have a book called Public Choice Theory and Illusion of Grand Strategy. I have an entire chapter on the war on terror, and basically, the short version is he barely thought about it. I mean, he barely thought about it. It was after 9/11. They assumed it would be very easy. A lot of people wanted to invade Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
so they went into Afghanistan. That was relatively easy. They didn't know they'd be there for another 20 years. It looked like the Taliban was gone. And like the country was just sort of looking around for some stuff to do. There were a lot of people who've been lobbying to attack Iraq for decades.
Okay.
And Bush put zero thought into it. He just thought he'd overthrow Saddam, like everyone would be happy, and
And they just
that
bounce.
would be it.
Okay.
Yeah, we just basically he didn't make a decision. He didn't even think about it because he was changing his decision. Like in the month, like he was like the Shalaby people and the neocons. They basically just wanted to like install their guy Ahmed Shalaby, and then leave. And those were the guys who won that debate. And then there was all these people in the State Department who were like, no, we have to do nation building. And the neocons at first thought Bush was on their side. He was just going to leave. And then, but the State Department guys just sort of convinced him. He had one meeting with a guy named Paul Bremer and said, okay, we're going to build a country in Iraq. I mean, it was that stupid, unfortunately. I mean, I wish there was a
I mean, that makes
conspiracy
more
theory.
sense than anything else. Yeah, because I
It
truly
would be
like.
more romantic.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
because even when people like lie, like usually you can see like what's going on. Like, okay, well, at least I understand like the goal here, but like, yeah, I truly don't understand. One of the things that bothers me, in regards to what you brought up for warp speed and stuff, is that with the new direction of the Conservative Party, like I kind of have felt. I kind of have felt like at least the progressive, like social justice warriors, SJWs, we used to call them in the past. I kind of view them as like American haters. So like these are the people that you went to if you wanted like a healthy dose of self-loathing, or if you wanted to check, your unbridled arrogance. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, we are racist, we are white supremacist, we killed all the Indians. Like fuck, okay, yeah, we are horrible. And then the conservatives are who you went to, where it's like, okay, actually, America's awesome. We were the back-to-back World War champions. Like we saved the fucking world and everything. We didn't even lose in Vietnam. Fuck those people, right? And you'd have like this kind of like tension of where, okay, well, we got to take credit for some things, we got to not take credit for other things, or take responsibility for other things. I feel like when I think Warp Speed was probably the first time where it's like, this is where I would have hoped that you have this right, where I view Operation Warp Speed was like, in my mind, this is like one of the crowning achievements of capitalism and globalism and free market like economics. You've got like multinational corporations that are working across the globe with other companies, with using combinations of public research with privately funded research with a government incentive to create like a historically quick vaccine for a new. It was like everything about this is so cool, and nobody can take credit for it. The left won't take credit for it because fuck Trump and fuck Warp Speed, and they kind of talk about the vaccines, and the right obviously is now completely anti anything having to do with medication, unless I guess it's like TRT or things to make your dick hard. And it's just like, it's sad because like nobody, it feels like everybody in this country hates this country right now. And conservatives at least used to be the people who are like, well, listen, fuck you, America's awesome. And now conservatives are like, well, actually, I don't even know if the good guys won World War II. And it's like, the fuck? Well, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's worse than that for Operation Warp Speed, because like there were smart free market economists who had been criticizing the FDA for decades, saying the FDA is too slow. It's just killing people by its inaction, by putting barriers in the way of drug innovation. And the people who pushed for this with like Alex Tabarrok and Tyler Cowen and these people, these like George Mason economists, who are not Republicans but are free market types. And conservatives were proved correct. The federal bureaucracy moves too slowly. Jared Kushner and Trump just sort of gave him a kick in the ass, and they ended up doing this. And they should have celebrated. This should have been a triumph of Trump personally. This should have been a triumph of conservative ideology. They were just too stupid. They were too stupid on the merits, too stupid on strategically. They became the party over time of like sort of the people who don't think, who are just sort of emotionally unstable and distrustful of institutions. And so they have to believe that the vaccine was killing millions of people across the world. And so yeah, there is like such a tragedy here. I mean, as far as like anti-Americanism on the left and right, I mean, still like it's weird. I mean, you have this protest today. Was it today or yesterday of Netanyahu? And they burned the American flag. These left-wing protesters. Now, Kamala Harris denounces them, very, very smart politically. And it's like, it's interesting because like, like conservatives are, it's like Tucker Carlson or J.D. Vance is not going to like burn the American flag, right? And so it's interesting like how they can be like, America sucks in every way, but they still have a loyalty to the symbols. And then the left are the ones who are just like unapologetically like, we don't like the founders, we'll burn the flag. But the left is a broad thing, right? Because you have this like center left people who are like, Trump, is pulling back from the world. Trump is, opposed to, the rules based international order. He's, he's attacking our democratic institutions. I think all of this gets classified as the left. I think those people on the left, should be do more to separate themselves from the pure America haters. Of course, people on the right should do the same too, but they're just, I think they're just, yeah, I wonder what is this thing? What is this thing where like you hate every institution in America, but you never burn the flag and you get offended if like someone actually like talks smack about it? I mean, it's a very sort of kind of weird psychologically.
Yeah, yeah. I always thought it was funny. Like the ultimate irony to me was like Trump running on his second term, still using the phrase like "Make America Great Again," and it's like, bro, you just had America for 4 years. What did you not do it last time? Or I don't understand this amorphous, this nebulous idea of like what even is America. Like you want to make the country great, but you hate all of our big businesses. You hate the idea of America as being like the leader of the free world. You hate any type of like foreign intervention at all, because all of them are hardcore isolationists now. You don't like imports, exports, so economically globalism, you don't like that. Inside of America, now conservatives used to be, at least I remember this being the case, unless I'm wrong, but growing up, conservatives used to love cops. I think love even like the FBI and stuff. I'm pretty sure they
Well, I
liked.
think they still love cops. They don't like the FBI because, again, cult of personality. It's just
Yeah,
purely.
all of the institutions are bad. I don't know,
Yeah.
man. Do conservatives still love cops after after the January 6th stuff, and then seeing the reaction to the Uvalde stuff? I don't know, man. I feel like conservatives are really split on police officers right now.
Uh, no, I mean, if they stand in the way of them charging the Capitol, sure. If they
Yeah,
stand in the way, if they arrest Trump, sure. The default is still pro cop. I mean, I think that you see, they have a flag. I mean, they have an American flag with a blue line in it, just like the cops get their own flag. I mean,
they did.
you can't do more praise than that.
They do have their own flag, but then I mean, similar to thinking like, did the left really support Jewish people and come out against anti-Semitism, or did the left just hate white supremacists? I have to wonder for conservatives, do conservatives really feel like they're backing the blue when they support cops, or were they just super anti-BLM? Like did Blue Lives Matter actually feel like a thing that conservatives felt was important, or was Blue Lives Matter just a protest against Black Lives Matter? I'm not
I mean,
sure.
it's against Black Lives Matter, but at the same time, they're anti-crime. I mean, they are anti, maybe too much, maybe too hysterical, but I mean, they do want cops to basically have more rights and clean up the streets of San Francisco and so forth. I think that is one thing that's sort of consistent.
Well,
The
anti-crime,
conservative,
except when it comes to the president of the United
yes,
States, apparently.
no, the Trump cult supersedes all. But then
Yeah,
there's like a second layer of like some things that actually are not related to that.
sure.
But you're right.
Yeah.
The cult is the cult is everything. People don't get this. Like when DeSantis was running, I wrote about this because people are like, oh, they're gonna like DeSantis because DeSantis is like Trump without the baggage. He's gonna fight wokeness. He's gonna fight illegal immigration
Hmm.
and so forth. It's like no, they didn't want that. They wanted literal Trump. Like that was the whole point. It's
Yeah.
like the cult of personality,
Hmm.
right? And DeSantis like ran his campaign in such a sort of wimpy way. I became disgusted with it over time. But I think we tested the hypothesis that it's like anything but the cult of personality, and it came out no, it's just the cult of personality. They just really, really love this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I thought DeSantis was going to be like a huge threat to Trump because he's everything that Trump represents policy wise. Plus, he's got a proven track record as governor, like arguably one of the most successful
Yeah, the
Republican governors.
intellectuals are with them. I mean, the Claremont Institute,
Hmm.
these guys, most conservative influencers who are somewhat intellectual, they were pro DeSantis. Like the Laura Loomer, like there's some who are just completely retarded, who have no sort of ideology at all. Those people were always pro Trump. But the conservative intelligentsia, I mean, as soon as it became clear, they got on the Trump train. They weren't gonna oppose him.
Yeah. I feel like there's this huge alternative media ecosystem right now. We have a whole bunch of these people that call themselves like nonpartisan, but all of them are hardcore anti-establishment, and basically all of them support Donald Trump. So you have like I would say like your Tim Pools, your Joe Rogans, just like this whole media apparatus of like these guys. None of them will call themselves conservatives. They might say they're libertarian, but they're like opposed to immigration. They're opposed to every like I think classical like libertarian idea. They'll say they're libertarian. They say they're centrist or whatever. They're nonpartisan, but they'll always come out for Trump. And they host this like circle of oh man, you did foreign relations, so hopefully I don't step on any toes here. But what people that I would consider to be hack academics, so your Mearsheimers, your Dr. Robert Malone's, that will always have like an audience in these kind of like centrist shows. Do you have any thoughts or feelings about like the coming together of certain types of public intellectuals or academics with like the centrist like media apparatus? Yeah.
There is, I mean, I think this is more a Trump cult thing than them being like associated with conservatives. A lot of these people like RFK. Rogan says he likes Bernie. Now, what do Bernie and like RFK and Trump have in common policy
Anti-establishment.
wise? Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's not really a policy thing. It's just like, I like that, I'm anti-establishment. Trump is, people who are anti-establishment are drawn to Trump. And some of this is just like low-level schizophrenia. I mean, I was watching Brett Weinstein the other day.
Oh
He
God.
was saying,
The
he,
one where he was
he was,
talking about how they tricked us into thinking that Biden was dead by not having him
yeah.
give a speech for a day. And yeah.
And that the point was to get away from the conspiracy theory of like what really happened with the Trump assassination attempt, right? And so this is just like Weinstein is an interesting character because he has 1 million followers on Twitter, and it's like he's not really ideological. He's just like consistently stupid. Like he just believes like the Chinese are sending illegal immigrants and they're genetically programmed because of the one child. He says these things that are just absolutely crazy. He thinks the October 7th attack was to distract us. There was this outing of this like one conservative influencer or something, and he was like, the October 7th attack was to distract us from this, or the outing was to distract us from October 7th. I don't know which is which, but it's
Mhm.
like one of these things is to distract us from the. I mean, this is schizophrenia. This should be treated as like a mental illness, right? And
Well, but
Trump
it's
just
it's
sort
a
of,
majority of the people on that side, though, right? These are like really popular figures, and I think most people buy into this stuff. Like when I
yeah,
talk to my parents today, they believe in every single one of these theories that January 6th was either fake or Antifa, that the vaccine was evil and horrible, that Russia's really not as bad as Biden is trying to make us believe. My mom is a Cuban immigrant. My parents both did 20 years in the Air Force in the Cold War, okay? And these people now, are like fully on board with, yeah, and it's like watching the change, even my parents, I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. They believe in all of it. And it's the majority of people. It's not just like before I would say, like, if some guy wants to argue, to make the anti-libertarian joke, like, oh, libertarian wants to argue there should be no age of consent. This is like 1% of people. Not even amongst libertarians. Most people don't believe this, right? But now it's like, what percentage of Americans believe that like the election wasn't authentic in 2020? For Republicans, it's like 70-ish%, depending on what poll you see. 70% believe the election was stolen. Like the votes were not
yeah,
real. And it's like, holy
yeah.
shit, that's a big problem.
Yeah, although the conservatives, what they'll point to, and I'll tell you, why it's the same and why it's different.
Mm-hmm.
What they point to is they can find polls from 2016 saying that, the election was stolen for Trump, like the Russians actually changed the vote. I don't know if it's like, it's like 30% or something like that. So that's true. And there was another poll recently about the assassination attempt. I don't remember what it was. And conservatives on Twitter run with this. Oh, look, liberals are just as bad. Now people are like stupid, all the time, and they have partisan conspiracy. The difference is from Republicans, they are playing to it, right? It's like these politicians, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and like Lauren Boebert and Trump himself. And there's influencers like Brett Weinstein who are sort of conservative, sort of not. These people are spreading out that they're profiting from it. They're getting elected, and they're having political gain based on it. Liberals, it exists in spite of like the liberal establishment acting relatively responsible. Now, if there was like liberals, a group of liberals who, and this is why it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of our conversation, liberalism is sort of like an intelligentsia. Like that, intelligentsias can go wrong. Intellectual communities can, believe in crazy ideas, but there's some check. These are people with brains. These are people who read. Maybe they're too naive. They trust the experts on every question or whatever, but they're not just going to go in these random directions and buy into these random stupid conspiracy theories. If they did, I mean, there would be a market for it if you just wanted to be and there are some, there's like Keith Olbermann. I mean, they're just people who are crazy. He's probably not as crazy as like Laura Loomer, but I mean, there's
Yeah.
people who are crazy and have huge audiences. But they're segregated. They're segregated from sort of the responsible left, and especially in the Trump era. I mean, Ted Cruz is going on Alex Jones. I mean, there's no barriers at all
Yeah.
between the crazies and the politicians and the elites.
One of the frustrating things, I don't know if you've watched my descent into chaos over the past couple of weeks since the Trump assassination attempt, but one of the things that's just like, I'm just like so fed up with it is that like every single time something bad happens that can ostensibly be blamed on the left, even if it's a Republican shooter shooting at Donald Trump, like the left has to be out there saying like, guys, we're so sorry. We're going to try to turn down the rhetoric. When Biden was running, there had to be a disavowal over the BLM riots. It was like violence isn't acceptable. We always expect the Democratic leaders to come out and say, this isn't good. This isn't okay. And then on the Republican side, it's like January 6th. I mean, what part do you want me to condemn? When the FBI staged it, or when Antifa were the ones that broke in, or when the police officers were the ones that walked them through the building? And I was like, okay, well, what about the Gretchen Whitmer plot? Oh, you mean the one that wouldn't have happened if the FBI didn't facilitate the entire thing? It's like, okay, well, what about when, like, every single conceivable possible thing you can bring up was actually the liberals' fault, and conservatives will take responsibility for absolutely fucking nothing, and they get credit for taking responsibility for nothing, and they get credit for, like, blaming it on the other side, right? And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, the media environment here is not the same, for these two groups of people. On one side, you've got Donald Trump, whose son-in-law, is managing hedge funds or is part of organizations that are signing $2 billion deals with, the Saudi Arabian crown prince. And then on the other end, you've got how many different news stories and investigations on Hunter Biden's cock, or the Hillary Clinton email stuff versus like the Mueller investigation. For as much as people want to talk about it, turned out nothing. That's not true. There are a lot of good pieces of information that came out. Aside from the credible indictments, there's a lot of good information that came out from that. Way more than came out from the fucking Benghazi hearings and the fucking Hillary Clinton email obsessive shit. But yeah, fuck, I don't know. It's just so, I feel like that double standard is very fucking irritating, that Democrats or liberals are supposed to be like, they go low, we go high, over and over and over again. Meanwhile, conservatives are like, the bar's in hell for conduct, where, like you said, yeah, Ted Cruz is talking to fucking Alex Jones, the guy who, and every single time they get caught with anything, it's never them trying to defend it, right? What did Alex Jones say in court? I was experiencing psychosis, right? What did Fox News say in the Dominion suit? Well, it's all entertainment, and then we fired Tucker Carlson. Or
I don't know if you've heard conservatives say this. He's directionally correct. Have you heard this?
Who, Trump or
Alex, like someone like Alex Jones? You'll say they're wrong, and they'll say, they make stuff up, and they'll be like, they're directionally correct. You've never heard that. Well, you can figure it out from context.
Reminds me when Joe Rogan was like, he's right about a lot of stuff, and I was like, he says a lot of things, bro. What do you mean? Yeah.
This is I mean, you're right. I mean, I think that no Democrats basically deny BLM riots happened. There's nobody who thinks they were a conservative psyop. I mean, they're the local. I mean, you could imagine a conspiracy theory. The local cops did it to get more police funding or something like that.
1,000,000%. You could even look at things like Rittenhouse, and it's like if it was if the roles were switched, you're telling me that Rittenhouse was able to shoot two people, and in video footage, there's literally a whole bunch of cops right down the fucking street. What do you mean you're going to tell me that conservatives didn't set this up? They were like, they literally sent him in as like a death squad assassin. Like he's got ties to helping police because there were videos that came out of him helping like clean shit up. Like, just the prior year. Yeah.
It makes you feel better, Destiny. I think it probably is good for your side in the end. I mean, I think that Republicans we'll see what happens with the Kamala polls, but Republicans have not been doing well in elections in the Trump era. The midterm was a historical disappointment for them. In every Senate race that's competitive, the Democrats are running well ahead of the Republicans. Biden might have had a unique problem just because he's old and maybe, I don't know, inflation. We'll see if Kamala fixes it. Mm-hmm. Republicans are not doing well electorally, and I think it's probably in part because people get the weirdness factor. I mean, you talk about your parents, and there's people who buy the stuff Brett Weinstein. That's not the majority of the country. I mean, it's not.
I hope not.
Brett Weinstein has 1 million followers, but I mean, it's not most people.
Because I think didn't polls say that, was it 40% of conservatives believed that there was I think 40% of conservatives believed that Podesta and Hillary Clinton were abusing children in the basement of a pizza parlor, that QAnon stuff.
Well, 40% of Republicans is nowhere near a majority of the country, right? So, like,
True.
These people are a huge faction within the Republican Party. They're probably electoral poison, and I think if Republicans lose, if they blow this election, I don't know if it'll correct. I mean, but at least smart people will look at this and say, there's got to be a change. We got to try to become more normal. Democrats are really leaning into this normalcy thing. I don't know. Did you see the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, who had these clips, and he's just like, they're just weird, man. Republicans these days, they ruin Thanksgiving dinner. He goes, they're running for a president of like He-Man Woman Haters Club. I think that's like a Married with Children reference. Mm-hmm. This is just, this is like an effective sort of, I think, strategy. If it works in the election, I mean, I think Republicans hopefully will do some soul searching and come back to earth.
I hope you're right, but I remember saying, I said the same thing on stream.
Just keep getting crazy.
Yeah,
you're right.
Because I remember in 2020, I said a lot that, like, I think people are tired of Trump crying about the election. Or no, I'm sorry. For the recent season, for 2023, 2024, people are tired of Trump crying about losing the election all the time. People are tired of like all the crazy shit. I think this is why they're going to choose like a Nikki Haley or DeSantis, and they got just soundly fucking crushed. Yeah. It wasn't even close. So I'm like, okay, never mind. Maybe they're not tired.
When Trump goes away, I mean, Haley ended up second place. So when Trump goes away, like, it's all sort of all the crazy people sort of don't have one guy to
Yeah.
all coalesce around. Remember the 2012 election when Romney won the nomination? It was like the crazy people were divided. There was like Michelle Bachmann, and there was Herman Cain, and these other people who are just sort of weird. I think without Trump, arguably the thing falls apart. The thing is, Trump will only be 82 in 2028. I mean, Biden was going to run at 82 until he was stopped. I mean, there's no guarantee that Trump is not the nominee in 2028 too.
Yeah. Regardless of his mental health, that is true. Um, yeah. What do you think happens? I guess it's impossible to predict. Yeah, because I see a world where Trump goes away, and in about a year, Fox News is like taking back all their audience from Newsmax, and now the conservatives are just kind of like bog standard conservatives again. I also see another world where people kind of tried it in the last election cycle, a little bit with like you saw with like your Viveks Ramaswamys that were up and coming, where people wanted to try to take over that cult of personality, the reins from Trump. But I don't think Trump has any interest in fostering that talent because I think he only cares about himself. Where do you see the Republican Party going after Trump?
Well, I think the JD Vance pick, I think, was a sort of attempt to perhaps anoint a successor. I mean, because he was younger and he sort of is consistent with Trump's ideas to the extent that Trump has ideas. I think Vance so far has not. I think he's not that charismatic. I mean, unfortunately for Trump and for the Republicans, so he may not have that ability. But yeah, I mean, Trump is just a unique force. I mean, you don't have the like you watch these videos, these Latinos for Trump and so forth. These rappers, they're like well produced like music videos. They get a lot of downloads. It's like no other candidate is going to do that. He's not going to. He activates the crazy people, and then he activates like these like urban rappers, and it's like what is this? This is a singular phenomenon, right?
Mm-hmm.
He goes away now. Like the Tea Party, I mean, it was moving in a crazy direction anyway. I mean, the Republicans were moving in a crazy direction anyway. This is why like they were there for the taking for Trump.
Yeah.
But he's gone. I think the Nikki Haley types, Nikki Haley, when she announced her candidacy, I mean, she tries to, she's seen as this big establishment person, but when she announced her candidacy, she gets up, in front of the camera and says, wokeness is the biggest threat to America, right? This is like trying to trying to address the concerns of Trump supporters. And so, like, when Trump is gone, maybe the Nikki Haley types incorporate sort of the anti-wokeness message, otherwise behave and act like normal people. But the pressure is still going to be there. I mean, the pressure is going to be there. Alex Jones has an audience for a reason. Ben Weinstein has an audience for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're going to be a force to dealt with. I just think Trump is the thing that's like just singular force that it's like the establishment and like the crazy people are sort of in balance. He's just like an amplifier. He just comes in and he just crushes them. He just makes them much stronger than they otherwise would be. When Trump goes away, it's at least a fight. It's at least a struggle.
I'm really curious how much I don't know if people talk about it much, but I really do feel like one of the biggest reasons why Trump was so successful as a candidate is because of The Apprentice. I really think that there was a really positive impression. That was a really popular show in the United States, especially with older people. And I think a lot of people had that like really good impression of him even before he came into politics, and that it helped with that star power and everything coming in too.
Yeah.
Why
I
do
mean,
you?
when we were
Or
we
no,
were
good.
growing up, I mean, yeah, we're about the same age. When we were growing up, like Donald Trump was just synonymous for rich person. He was
Yeah.
like Donald Trump, and he was never like the richest person in the world or anything,
Hmm.
but he was good at like managing his image. So this is part of it. It's like the biggest. If Oprah Winfrey like wanted to be a Democratic politician, like maybe it would have worked, right? It's something like that. It's somebody who's just like an A+ list celebrity. He's like one of the most famous people in the world with the charisma going into politics. I
Hmm.
mean, it just all this stuff had to work out.
But then even his entrance into politics was so fucking bizarre because I feel like Trump's big splash was the fucking Obama birther shit.
I mean, but he understood something about the Republican base. I mean, he saw a market and he went in there. Yeah, exactly. I think that's his genius, actually.
Is it? Do you think so?
Yeah, I think he has a genius as far as a instinct for what the Republican base wants, because fundamentally he is like them. He watches a lot of TV. He
Hmm.
doesn't like foreigners. He's very sort of crude in his habits. He eats McDonald's and likes gold toilets and so forth. I think he's fundamentally them. I think he's like a kind of a natural leader for them.
I could agree, maybe kind of like the natural leader stuff. I'm still not sold on him being like secretly like a genius. I think that one.
No, I think it was he understood. It was instinctual. It's like it wasn't like 2012. I'm going to talk about birth certificate. By 2016, I'm going to run for president. It
Mhm.
was just like he starts talking about it. He sees the
Oh,
reaction.
sure, sure.
He's
He's
like,
got like a
like that.
natural inclination towards that crowd. For sure. I could agree with that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in 2016 when he goes, the rape, they're sending their rapists. When he makes the announcement, some of them are good people. It seemed like accident. It doesn't seem like that was like a planned line, but he just saw like there was such a reaction to it, and like people tried to cancel him over it. This made like a kind of a reaction to it on the right, the illegal immigration issue. He took it and ran with it. Yeah, it's not a master plan, but it
Hmm.
is sort of an instinctual moving towards a goal.
Sure. Do you think that I feel like there are people online? I don't know if this has always happened historically, but I feel like there are people online. I call these like your mind fuck moment, where a person's entire political ideology is defined by one singular moment or struggle that they've had. So I'm looking at. Did you know anything about like Eric Weinstein? I think it's Eric, right? For the Evergreen College stuff.
The one who was at Evergreen was Brett.
Oh, Brett
Eric,
Weinstein. Okay. Did you see the Evergreen College stuff?
I followed it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went back and I read. I kind of assumed for a while that he was always like kind of crazy, like anti woke dude. But I read a lot of the stuff that he had written in terms of the emails and stuff, opposing that like the day of absence or whatever. And I feel like everything he said was really on point. Like I could have seen myself writing something like this is everything. I agree with this 100%. He supported the message. He supported the cause. He just felt like excluding white people is a lot different than some people volunteering to step back. And because of that protest there and his getting like kicked off campus by the kids or whatever, which was wrong. I think that the kids were in the wrong. I think it was stupid. I don't agree with any of them. But it feels like people have this tendency to when somebody does something that you don't like, rather than saying like that's so fucking stupid, I'm gonna figure out like what's way better than that. People do this thing where like that's so fucking stupid, I'm gonna do the exact opposite of that. And I find like Jordan Peterson and Bill C16, I think it's the same thing. I think Joe Rogan at COVID was the same thing, where people have these like one moments and now the rest of their political identity is shaped around being a reactionary to that moment or reacting to that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is audience capture. I mean, people use the term, but it is true. It's sort of addictive. I mean, when you get like, when you get a lot of attention. I mean, Jordan Peterson almost strikes me as somebody who's like not really psychologically suited for what he's doing. I mean, he seems to break down a lot. It seems to have a lot of problems. It seems to have happened.
Watching
Like
him fight
he
with his
just,
daughter on Twitter is fucking Kino hilarious fucking shit. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
he's been fighting with his daughter. I did not know
He'll
this.
somebody will like tweet something negative about his daughter or something. He'll tweet like, "You need to stop. Like she's a whatever," and then his daughter will tweet at him and be like, "Dad, it's okay. Like it's not a big deal." And he's just like, it's just like fucking
I
like.
remember he told her you're grounded. I saw him say you're grounded. I assumed it was like a joke.
I think he's
Uh,
legitimately fighting with people on Twitter, and his daughter's like tweeting at him, trying to get him to like calm the fuck down. Yeah.
that's funny. Yeah. I mean, Brett Weinstein, like, who would he be if not for his conspiracy theories, right? He'd just be this one canceled college professor. I mean, so there is a side that it is these people's interest to go in this direction. I'm not saying they're necessarily dishonest or they're consciously lying, but I think it's like we said with Trump, it's sort of an instinctual thing where it's like this is where the audience is. I mean, you have to be sort of a kind of unique person to just like care about truth. Like
Sure.
truth is not as like a big audience. I mean, like people, these people have millions and millions of followers. People who just make stuff up. I saw this guy named Matt Wallace. I'd never heard of him like a month ago. I'm like, where was this guy? He's got like 2.6 million followers, and I never heard of him. It's just literally complete man. Reports are saying that Obama's about to fly and take control of the presidency. I mean, just complete nonsense, like all day and stream of this. He's got 2.6 million followers. What would this guy be doing? Like, this guy has an IQ of a tomato. I mean, he'd be driving a cab or something if he wasn't being an online influencer. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think intellectuals, I think people who care about truth, I think they have to gatekeep a little bit. I mean, I think they have to be like, this is not okay. This is not stuff that should be tolerated in the public discourse. It's pollution. It's
So
pollution. It's like throwing
yeah, I agree
food into the
100%
air.
with what you're saying here, but it feels like it flies in the face of what you said earlier, where you're like with JD, I think the example you gave is, wouldn't JD Vance have a better time coming out and being more policy driven? And I feel like right now, because of the social media apparatus and how stuff is fed to us, there's a huge incentive like never before to shovel. I don't want to say dishonesty. Dishonesty is like the byproduct of hyper emotional narratives that appeal to people's worldview. And then fact is like takes a far, far,
No,
far
you're
backseat
you're
to this.
right. But,
Yeah.
but JD Vance is a political candidate. So there's difference
Hmm.
from someone who has a podcast or a
Hmm.
Twitter account and they're trying to get as big as possible from someone who's running for president. I think when you're running for president or vice president, I think that's when you moderate. JD Vance got where he is by being who he is, right? It was the sensible strategy to play to these sort of right wing resentments. Now I think it's he's in a different position, and now he's got to actually win over voters who are not part of that same community.
Okay, true. How do you feel about two party systems?
It's like I don't know. It's like it's there. I think we're stuck with it. I mean, I don't think the I don't think there's worth thinking about all that much. I don't know. Like I think parliamentary versus presidential is sort of a more interesting question because like nobody designs like number of party system, right? Nobody like came to the U.S. and said, okay, we're going to have two parties. In the U.K., we're going to have three or four
Hmm.
big parties. It's sort of an emergent property. So like to have an opinion on it, it's like not how it's not how they function. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in the American context, I mean, we're stuck with the two parties, and there's a lot of room within them to change them. But I think that's not going to change anytime soon. I think the Libertarian Party, you see, like they're so crazy, and I think it's just because anyone with brains realizes that like a third party is going nowhere in the U.S.
Sure. Do you think we should change our first past the post voting system to give an opportunity for more voices, or do you think the primary system does a good enough job at like representing a wide variety of voices?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like change for first past the post. I think that probably. I mean, I think that uh, the ranked choice voting is probably better if you want more moderate, less crazy candidates. Changing first past the post. I mean, you could have someone with 30% of the. I think that could probably take you away from moderation. I think that you could probably have more crazy people getting into office. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to organize these things because so much depends on the culture and sort of the institutions within society. I think these things can go in either direction.
Okay. What do you think about? These are just like random questions. I'm just curious your thoughts on them. So I don't have a particular direction with these. What do you think about some people? There are people that I have identified that I feel are very intelligent. So they both have what I would imagine is probably high G, high IQ if they were to test it, and they seem to have like some mastery in their field. But they dramatically overestimate their competency and everything else, and they just become just fucking retarded in that they still have the IQ, but there's no rational thought, there's no like logical schema. My two go-to examples for this are one is, are you familiar with Ben Carson?
Hmm.
Are you familiar with like the retarded political shit he says? Like gay people or people
Oh
go to
yeah,
prisons, they
yeah,
come out gay. You know that he's like the brain surgeon that like pioneered the
yeah,
separation at like a fucking
yeah.
site, like an unbelievably accomplished.
And it's amazing to imagine it, right? Because he doesn't seem like a surgeon. Like he seems like he falls asleep during surgery. It
He
just
does,
doesn't. It's a
yeah.
very sort of persona. It seems very odd. But yes, they tell me he does. He
Yeah,
does
Jesus,
surgery.
yeah. Or like Jordan Peterson, who, when I
Yeah,
listened to his old stuff on psychology, it didn't even just sound good. It was like genuinely
yeah,
insightful. He was a good speaker.
yeah,
I thought he communicated ideas in a compelling manner, and I thought it was insightful stuff. And then he
yeah.
talks about, like, in our last debate, he's like, yeah, 20% excess deaths in Europe are caused by the vaccine. And I'm like, what? Yeah, what do you make of this? Why?
I think that it just. Yeah, you're right. I mean, intelligence can be sort of very compartmentalized, right? And I think it just this sort of phenomenon you're describing is absolutely real. I mean, you look at these tech guys and you look, they made like billions of dollars, like they invented pioneered something, and they're just talking like a Fox News boomer. I mean, there's nothing like they're adding in terms of ideas. You're right. I think this is like a good case for liberalism, like small L liberalism, not like the Democratic Party, but like having a society with like pluralism and like free speech, because like nobody is that smart. Like somebody could like send rockets to space and revolutionize various tech industries, and just have like can be responding to cat turd on Twitter and being very impressed with him.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's really sort of fortified my belief in liberalism as like the best way to organize society.
Do you think that, what do you make of Elon Musk?
I think he's a hero actually for like what he's done in for electric vehicles, for trying to get us to space. I think he's a hero for saving us, for saving Twitter. I know Twitter sucks now, but like I might be banned by now if it wasn't for him. I had like all these like little suspensions, and they were so stupid. One
Hmm.
time I said "death to boomers" as a joke, and they suspended me for that. And then I got a second strike. I don't even remember what it was. And so by now I'd probably be gone or heavily restricted, and it was just like that's like an absurd. Like I'm a reasonable guy. I'm not making shit up. I'm I'm not calling people racial slurs or whatever. So it was really difficult. I mean, before that. So I think he did a selfless thing by buying Twitter. He tried to back out of it at the last minute, arguably, but still, I mean, generally he cared about free speech, and I can't complain, even though it's a lot of false, fake news and misinformation has been getting out there, unfortunately. Um,
I feel
and
like,
so yeah,
yeah, like, so I can sympathize a little. I guess actually, no, in the same way. I was primer banned from Twitter before Elon bought it, and then I managed to get connected with their head of whatever the fuck
really.
after he
What were you
bought it. And I
perma
went,
ban? What were you perma ban for?
I think I was having issues with my ISP, and I think I threatened to bomb their the local plant. It was pretty unhinged.
That'll do it.
But I was a League of Legends player. Okay, I can't be blamed for that. Anyway, sorry, fuck. Yeah, Elon Musk is another one of those characters where I would consider. How do I put this? So I can appreciate things about people while hating the person or hating aspects of them. Okay, I excel at that. Okay, so I can give him credit for the car stuff and the rocket stuff, especially the rocket stuff. I think is really, really, really cool. Both the technology and the implication, just for the idea that I think it's sad that the country that had the first people that went to the moon was relying on China or Russia to send our astronauts to space. I think that's really sad. And the idea that and again, I think it's an accomplishment of globalism, of immigration, of capitalism, and of government incentive all come together to make it so that things like SpaceX and then Tesla were possible. I think that's really, really cool. But man, wow. It feels like a Ben Carson moment to where, kind of what you said before, when I look at what he tweets or when I look at when he talks about politics, it's not even like stupid in the way that I think like Mearsheimer might be stupid. And that like, I feel like his predictions and his analysis are just really off in a variety of ways. It's stupid in that like, I feel like Elon Musk is saying politically what I would expect any random fucking boomer on the street to say about politics. It's not even trying to be more insightful or intellectual than that. It's just, yeah.
I wonder how much of it. I mean, I'm not. I don't. I wonder how much of it he just sort of sees politics, and a lot of these tech guys see it as the way you see a business. So like you're on the red team, and so like when you're trying to raise funds for a company, you're going out there and you're just hyping it to the greatest extent possible, right? You're not thinking in terms of like what's actually true. And I suspect a lot of these guys approach politics the same way. I mean, the way they all just buy into this. Oh, the Democrats are disenfranchising their voters. Like no Democrat is even buying this, right? They're just sort of seems like they're just throwing whatever they can at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
And so Musk, I like a lot of his opinions. I mean, I think he's right on like COVID rules and he went from California to Texas. I think California has done terrible things as far as incentivizing business. I think they were crazy on COVID again, and he was right to push back against that. But yeah, I mean, you're right that there's there's many things he says that are not well thought out.
Yeah, and then even at that, I don't even know if I would agree with that. I have to go back and see the specific criticisms. But like going back to, because it's similar to the example I gave before, that I think that there might have been an opportunity to push back against COVID restrictions in a really intelligent way. I did a lot of traveling, even some international travel during COVID, and oh my fucking God, it was a nightmare. Holy shit, going from country, and every different country had a different app and different requirements and different vaccine requirements and different masking requirements and different, it was horrible. But it's hard to take any of the criticism seriously or engage with it when the criticism isn't, the state is doing lockdown measures that we don't believe there is adequate epidemiological justification for, and the harm that's going to be caused economically and maybe even socially might outweigh the economic benefit. Instead, it's why are we allowing these people who just want to control our lives and destroy society and destroy business and support the bioweapons coming from China? Why are we letting them dictate our policy? We need absolute freedom, and fuck the government and fuck the institution. It's just like, well, fuck. Like, how am I supposed to agree with that? What am I supposed? Yeah.
It's hard to distribute blame. I mean, you said like, all countries were sort of crazy. It's not unique to the US. Like they were masking during Omicron, like after everyone had been vaccinated in Europe. I mean, this was, I think, 2021 to 2022 or something like that. I mean, very late. And the Democratic areas, they kept the schools closed forever, right? And like if the conservatives had been reasonable, would they have been able to push back more and gotten things to change? I don't know. Like it didn't work out. Like where the conservatives were less crazy in other countries, it didn't seem like the rules were much better. I think maybe the craziness sort of, it's like ideally you want a sane society, right? You want people to say, okay, I did a cost benefit analysis and the vaccine is good. Masking children forever and like closing the schools is bad. Lockdowns, we don't necessarily do that. And like maybe that's just like too much to expect that somebody will get that perfectly. All you can have is like, we're freaking out about this and we're going to like do everything. Or you have these people who just say, F you, you Bill Gates, globalists are not going to be able to tell me what to do. And in the US, I mean, like, what was the end result? Like a lot of these red states, they went back to life as normal much, much sooner. I mean, it was so sad. I live out here in California. You see kids playing basketball outside masking until like a year and a half ago. I mean, it was just insane outside. I mean, this was what the public schools were doing here in California. And so, I don't know. Like, it's like it's easy to be mad at conservatives and like say, oh, they believe a lot of stupid shit, and indeed they do. But at the same time, like from California, looking at the results and how crazy the left went for how long, I think overall COVID has to be credit to them. Despite I'm the most pro-vax person in the world. Despite that.
I guess the issue that I have as somebody who is, I will never call myself a centrist because fuck what that's been basically made into online, the caricature of like any type of nonpartisan position. But I guess one of the annoying things that I have when I debate like public policy or anything else is I have to spend so much, or I used to have to spend so much of the debate basically disavowing everything that my side believes, where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to argue about this. No, I'm not in favor of like mandated passports and masking forever inside your own home. And no, I'm not in favor of this. No, and then once I've got through all of that, then I'm like, okay, so let's talk about this particular thing. I guess, and there's no real way to test it, but I wonder if, I would hope that if there was a more sane conservative side, because I think even prospectively, I think we probably could have done a lot less on the school lockdown stuff, that could have been shortened. I wonder if the conservative side would have been more reasonable there, if there would have been a reasonable voice that was pushing in that direction. And reasonable doesn't even have to mean they get it exactly right. Reasonable, just like even somebody saying there should never be school lockdowns, kids get sick and it happens, okay? And teachers might get sick too, that's the risk. I would consider that reasonable, fine. Or at least it's within the realm of acceptable political discourse, even if I would have disagreed with that person. But when my side is saying, we need lockdowns because kids are getting sick and some teachers are dying, which is true, but how much is that impacting? And then the other side is saying, okay, so you want to let the Chinese, the Kung Flu, the woke Chinese mind virus that's infecting, and not killing a single fucking person, and the vaccine's killing more. You want to lock down schools for that? It's like, okay, well, fuck. Like, well, I'm not going to agree with that side. Fuck me,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could say either side would be more reasonable if the other side was a little bit more reasonable. Yeah, I think they really, I mean, the teachers unions, I think, were a very malicious force here. There was, you'd read the New York Times and you'd read, Atlantic and so forth, and there would be reasonable people. I mean, I think the liberal consensus, like the elite liberal consensus, again, like the ones who publish for the most prestigious newspapers and magazines, they were like over school closures, like very early, even over like masking kids and stuff. It was just the teachers unions who were like an interest group. Are they just responding to Trump and conservatives, or are they just like crazy people who just don't want to ever work and end up having control?
Yeah, this is another issue that I have too for the U.S. in general is people don't seem to understand sometimes like what things are for and what countervailing forces should be for. So, for instance, when people are grilling pharmaceutical execs over like, did you raise the cost of this drug to make more money for your company? Like, you're demonizing this guy for performing his function. Like, they're supposed to make money. That's literally it. They're not here for the moral good of society. If you want to guide that, that's for government policy. Or when it comes to unions, people have this view of unions being like an intrinsically good thing, and it's like they're not. Unions are there to represent employees, and they're there to make the employees get paid more. So, like, whether or not a union is good or bad it carries no normative value. The same that a corporation doesn't carry any normative value. But people will look at like police unions are bad because they don't like police, or teachers unions are good because they defend teachers. And even with what you're saying there, like, well, the teachers unions were kind of crazy. They were just trying to get teachers to work as little as possible. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do, right? That's all. An employee is supposed to work as little as possible for the greatest compensation, and the employer is supposed to get as much work out of you for the least amount of compensation. But people normatively load these unions so much that it becomes like if you defend or oppose like the police union or the teachers union, you're either like a good or bad person. It's like, bro, it's just a union. It's just a collection of employees that are trying to get as much as they can, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be as blasé about it. I mean, I wouldn't say that, they're just doing what they're doing. I mean, they are a government. It's the government. It's a government institution that is working against the rest of society. Now, you have a legislature, they pass a law. They have to balance the teachers, they have to balance the kids, they have to balance the parents. They're supposed to, the taxpayer, they're balancing the interests of all society, right? You have one group of people that exercises power just over this one faction, which is the government itself. It's like the government trying to extract from the rest of society. So I think in a case like that, I mean, I think you can say...
Well, careful, because the teachers union itself, I don't believe is like, that's not like a government. Like the American Federation of Teachers, that's not like that's a private entity, right? I don't think it's a government union.
Well, the government. I mean, it's not officially a government union, but it's the federal law that basically requires the union laws is sort of complicated. I know in the private sector, I haven't done the research on the public sector, but in the private sector, basically, they have a law where like if the majority votes for unionization, they get to basically do what they basically get to negotiate on behalf of all employees, right?
Sure.
So it's a government thing where you can't just say screw you, union, go off, right? Like you have to deal with them because the government. I'm sure it's the same way.
Sure, there might be some favorable. Yeah, sure.
And they used to take out the dues. They stopped that. There was a Supreme Court case that stopped that. So, but at their heart, unions are they're either government institutions or they're facilitated by government. I mean, they usually wouldn't exist otherwise.
Sure, possibly, yeah. Although on the other end, if it wasn't facilitated to some extent by government, then the argument would probably be that lack of unions are facilitated by government, because then every private corporation could necessarily just say no unioning, or we're going to literally just fire you, in which case unions would never exist. And now people are like, okay,
Yeah.
well, we don't have any kind of government like protection or sponsorship for a union. We're completely fucked, right?
Yeah, I mean, from a libertarian perspective, what defends the workers and gets them better wages and better conditions is the market is competition, right? So if somebody's screwing over their workers, they find a better environment. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a perfect system, but it does create the right incentives. Obviously, there's going to be power asymmetries. If you really are worried about that, I would prefer just giving people money directly, and then the balance is not so bad anymore if you have a universal basic income or some kind of means tested welfare policy. Like, okay, but I think the competition is the best way to sort of determine, like, the distribution of labor and resources.
Okay, I think there are, if we go into that, I think we'll find areas we disagree, but we don't have to get too deep into that. Another kind of broad question: do you think that institutions are important in the United States? And then, assuming you say yes, what do we do to rebuild institutional trust, or do you ever see that coming back in any way, size, shape, or form?
I have one of my favorite articles that I wrote that got like so much attention and got like a lot of people mad. It's just called "The Media is Honest and Good," and you can imagine like how people like, especially a right-leaning audience, that sort of drove them crazy. I think it's unique. I think we are uniquely blessed. Like New York Times, like it sucks in some way when they screw up. We all sit there and we laugh at it. And we say, what terrible, they're being unfair and so forth. But like to have institutions that care about truth, like I could pick up the New York Times, I could pick up the Wall Street Journal, any serious paper, and they're telling me what's going on in, Myanmar, which is having a very fascinating civil war. I know they're not just making stuff up, and like they're not just giving me something because there's a partisan reason. When they report on the war in Myanmar, it's not like it's going to help them politically. They are just providing information to the world,
Mm-hmm.
and this is historically, quite rare. I think that the norm is like most of the media. I think in most countries, most of the time, is like right wing media. I think right wing media is like sort of a third world media, right? Where it's like, maybe they have some standards of truth. They do. I mean, there's some good conservative outlets, but at the same time, like the whole thing is geared towards a sort of line, right? It's geared towards propaganda. It doesn't. It's like indifferent to most things. It just wants to talk about, Kamala's, inflation or Hillary's emails and so forth. And so academia too, to a limited extent. I've been talking to a friend who's in biology, and all these tech guys online are like, academia is a joke. Everything should just be done privately. And she's just sending me like all these like amazing things, like these breakthroughs that come out of academia. Like I think that a lot of the social sciences are broken, but the hard sciences, I mean, people, a lot of what people are inventing, a lot of the progress that's being made, it's happening there. So yes, institutions are obviously very important. How do we reestablish trust? I do think, again, going back to like the Great Awakening. I mean, this was so cancerous. I mean, this was like this drove the right crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fact that they were they were everything had to focus on white privilege, oppression, these different categories, and these kinds of ways of viewing the world, like they're not just wrong in themselves. They're like not conducive to truth, right? Someone who calls themselves a Marxist is like generally not going to be a good journalist, right? Compared to someone who considers himself a centrist or a normal liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we reestablish trust? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's like amazing to me. Like the media is as honest as it is. Like given the incentives, like they should just lie. They should just make stuff up. They should. I mean, like that's what like I would do if I was CNN. I just wanted to maximize profit, right? I would just go for the most sensational stuff. But they don't do that. They have
Well,
some kind of ethics.
not to be like super partisan, but I mean, if you ever read the depositions or the stuff that came out of that Dominion media suit, that was essentially what was happening with Fox. I
Yeah,
wasn't aware of this at the time. Fox has like a brain room where they do fact checking, they do good fact checking, they do good work
yeah,
behind the scenes
yeah,
there. But they were like, we're losing our fucking audience to Newsmax. We have to push
yeah.
these stories or we're fucked. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, you're right. I mean, this is the flaw of conservative media. Yeah, they should have been ashamed. I mean, I did see that. I
Oh,
did see that Dominion stuff, and I saw, Tucker specifically, who knew it was all fake, and then like later says, "We're losing our audience." Oh my God!
yeah.
It's psychologically a sort of fascinating thing because to these, to a lot of these people, truth doesn't have value in its own sake, right? It's like you could see truth. The second truth becomes inconvenient. The second it's going to lose you a few viewers, it's going to lose you a little bit of an audience. You chuck it, and
Hmm.
then you tell yourself, "Well, the libs are bad anyway. They lie
Yeah.
just as much," and you're able to assuage your guilt. Yeah, this is a. I think this was a. But did you also look into the Roger Ailes stuff at Fox?
Roger Ale. No, what's that?
Roger Ailes was like the guy who ran Fox until he died like 3 or 4 years ago. So it was like Murdoch, and then Roger Ailes was the guy, and he was basically sexually harassing all the women, but like not just like stuff on like the borderlines of like Me Too, like seriously, like he would make these women like make explicit tapes for him, and then like hold them, and then like this was there was a big lawsuit about this that Gretchen Carlson woman was suing him, and all these like Fox News personalities came out, and so this guy was like ran like Fox News sort of like his fiefdom, like all those pretty girls who were on TV. He was either like having sex with them or bribing them or using them, and then
Okay.
like he was he was fired eventually. There were lawsuits, and then he died, and then it was just like conservatives moved on. Just like this serial harasser was running Fox News, and I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, you could never flirt with a girl, but these stories were really really bad, and the conservative movement just forgot about it. They just moved on.
Why do you think there is such a lack of accountability when it comes to getting things wrong?
The audience doesn't care. This is why, like, someone pointed out to me, there's these websites called, like, there's this website called Puck News, and there's these other ones like Axios. They're saying there's like, there's these, Semaphore is another good one. Like, these outlets have popped up, and they are generally, they're in that market where they are for people who think the standard media is a little bit too left wing, but they still want truth. So there's a left wing audience that says, okay, I don't need all this, critical race theory and stuff. But I want some reporting on politics or foreign policy or whatever. So that's the competition within the liberals. I mean, does come down to like these are like educated intellectual people at some level, or at least they respect the intellect, whether they're smart or not.
Hmm.
Um, and then on the conservative side, the competition is Newsmax, it's Own, it's Alex Jones, and like Fox, like it's like amazing they're as good as they are because like they should also be a little bit crazier, right? But they are sort of integrated into like serious
They do reporting at
journalists.
least and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they got rid of Tucker eventually. I mean he was the worst as far as like making things up, and so yeah, I mean this is these are different. Yeah, I'm so negative on conservatives, man. My answer to everything is like they don't care about truth. They're
Yeah.
not intellectual, and they just want to sort of win and be entertained. Another thing is interesting thing about the conservative media is like you look at like the Daily Mail in the UK or the New York Post, and it's very interesting. They're like half tabloids, half conservative newspapers, and it's like the National Enquirer going all in on Trump too is very interesting because it's like they're the tabloid readers, right? That's very interesting. Like you don't see like the New York Times / National Enquirer or something like that. It's like a very sign of like simple-minded, just wants to be entertained. And the fact that these two things go together, I think, tells you something like deep about the differences between conservatives and liberals.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's all very sad. um,
Yeah, black pilling you. I'm sorry.
well, no, trust me, my friend, I'm already so black pilled. Okay. My pill is whatever the color, anytime there's that Reddit post and it's like, this is one of the blackest colors of all time, absorbs like every single like wavelength. Like that's the pill I've consumed. I am in favor of one law. Okay. If I were to ever pass a law, if I was an emperor of the universe, okay. I feel like if anybody works in media at all, like if you've got a YouTube channel over 1,000 subs, whatever, if you do media in some way, size, shape, or form, pretend we have a good way to determine this, okay? I feel
Right.
like you should have to make, if not a public income disclosure, like a private disclosure to some federal entity that makes sure that you're not taking money from weird sources. Do you think that's fair, or do you think that's bullshit?
The private. So who would be? What would be the rules? You would.
I just want to
Uh,
know when. So here's one thing that is starting to mind fuck me. It's very confusing me, and I don't know anymore. I'm genuinely not sure, especially talking to people behind the scenes, which implies I know a whole bunch of crazy shit, but I don't know that much. Just weird shit that I hear. I don't know when I see every single like centrist, nonpartisan, pro-Trump person also repeats every single Russian talking point lockstep. I'm curious sometimes, like where these people's paychecks come from. Do you know who like Jackson Hinkle is?
of course, yeah.
That guy is a paid Russian show. I would my life on it. 1 trillion%. I just think if somebody is disseminating so much information in my country, I think I have a right to know where their paid sources are from, or at least that there's some agency that makes sure it's not a foreign source. I think that's important.
Yeah, there is something called the Foreign Agents Registration Act, as you probably know. It has loopholes, as far as I understand it.
Hmm.
That like if you call it like scholarship or research, like you
Yeah.
don't have to.
Or
It's
I
like
could get
Jackson
paid by a
Hinkle.
domestic organization that's like funneled money from outside or whatever as well, right? There are
Yeah,
different ways.
I think people will probably find ways, around it. I don't know. Like it would be just hard enforcement. You're going to watch every influencer, everyone in media. There's people with millions of Twitter followers, or hundreds of thousands. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems to be like
Make them
not
do
very
compliance. I don't
enforceable.
care. It might be hard. It's also hard to find murderers, okay? But we still do it.
Yeah, well, we got, but yeah, I mean, I think it would be, and so you would, I mean, you do file a tax return. You do
Yeah.
have that. So you do file your income if the government, if you're doing something illegal, the government can look into it. So I don't know. I don't having this like heightened standard for people in media. I don't know. I think that's not good for free speech. I think that sort
Okay.
of chills people. You know, you have to go through a more bureaucratic hurdles. You have to file like double a tax return. Like if you're in media, people are just going to say it's not worth it. Maybe that's
It is
good in
true
some
that
cases.
it might have a chilling effect and it's a heightened standard, but I think you have a heightened influence and responsibility. Like theoretically, if the Republic falls, I'm blaming alternative media. Okay, I'm gonna have like a
Yeah.
"fuck Tim Pool" sticker on my AR-15. Okay, if I'm running through the streets as America collapses and we're in the Civil War, I'm gonna be blaming alternative media
Yeah.
for it.
Well,
Okay.
Brent Weinstein will say he warned you and he told you that they were going to do this to us. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
True.
know. Yeah, I don't like it doesn't need an explanation. Like the audience, like Tim Pool, like Brent Weinstein, do they need money from? No, I think they're making plenty just from their audience. The problem is us.
Maybe.
Like
Yeah.
Jackson Hinkle, I mean, he might be a paid agent. I mean, he's so
Hmm.
crazy. He's like Russians, like would they like I just don't feel like Russians would like he's like, you know, Osama bin Laden is awesome. Like Kim Jong Un is awesome. Like are Russians paying for that? Maybe. I don't know. He just seems like a crazy person, but it works for him. He's got, you know, 2 or 3 million followers or something like that. I mean,
If
it's
they're real, I
pretty.
don't think so. I think he's got like maybe 20 or 30,000 at
No,
most. I think.
I think it's international. I think that like the fact that Twitter is not just America, like you know, there's a lot of just anti-Semitic crazy people in like the Middle East and so forth, and just a lot of anti-Americans. So I think when you consider it in the context of like a global audience, I think it might make sense. But you're right, probably some of them are bots.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me. I don't know if there are public filings. I'll make this prediction of the past right now, and I haven't looked. Maybe I'm super wrong. It wouldn't surprise me if over 40% of the traffic from Twitter was just America. Maybe over 50% was just America, even though it's an international platform. I bet the
Yeah,
vast majority of the traffic. I know there's no public filings now, but I wonder if that was ever disclosed before in statements. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but yeah.
I think you're probably right.
Well, do you have anything else you want to chat about, or anything else on your brain, or?
Not really. I mean, I enjoyed this. Yeah, we could.
Do you
I mean, we could
ever
talk about it.
do you ever engage with any of the other like Twitter wonks or the Twitter writers like the Noah Opinion or yeah, any, do you know?
You know what? A lot of them wouldn't. So some of them, the right wingers will still talk to me. The left wingers, I noticed after the Huffington Post article came out, they became scared because their readers would like yell at them. So I would like engage with like Nate Silver and like you know, Noah Smith. And then they like sort of stopped right there. Iglesias was very interesting because he would still engage with me a little bit, and like his audience would yell at him, and he like stood up to his audience. It was very impressive. He's like, he's a smart guy. You're saying this racist is a smart guy? He'd be like, he's a smart guy. I don't care. And it was like a very sort of honorable thing to do.
Mhm.
But in general, not so much on the leftists anymore. But yeah, I mean, I'll talk to, you know, I don't know, Wilfred Riley, Chris Rufo, a lot of, you know, the center intellectual dark web to right wing people. I'll talk to them. You know, the conspiracy theorists and such. You know, I won't. It's not even worth it. I mean, I'll dunk on them. I'll get a good laugh out of Candace Owens, but like I don't think you debate like a schizophrenic or somebody who's like borderline schizophrenic. I just think there's nothing good that's going to come out of that.
Do you have an opinion on the IDW?
You know, I don't think it exists anymore. I mean, I think that like, you know, Sam Harris, you listen to Sam Harris and he, you know, he says, I just, you know, whatever card, you know, I'm turning in my IDW card. He's like, I want nothing to do with Brett Weinstein. And so you've had this sort of, you had like Bari Weiss go and do our own thing. You had like Brett Weinstein and like Rogan and like crazy conspiracy land. You have Sam Harris off doing his own thing. So yeah, I'm not sure to the extent to which you know it exists anymore. It's just sort of it was like a sort of a way to classify um, you know, a group of people. I mean, they really did split over sort of, I think, vaccines, conspiracy theories. Trump, Colette is still out there. I think it was almost considered kind of like an IDW thing, but you know, Claire is very sane and doesn't accept any of these crazy conspiracy theories. So yeah, I mean, it broke up into like the people who are sort of sane and the people who are out of their minds, and that's sort
Yeah.
of where we are now.
One of the big issues that I have when people talk about like skepticism, like I think that skepticism is probably one of the most important qualities that people can have. But I feel like there's a lot of terms now, maybe it's always been this way, where people will take something that has an incredibly noble function and they wield it only aesthetically. So when you talk about like people that are skeptical, I know 99% of the time, if somebody describes themselves as a skeptic, I know what this means. It means that they're going to tell me they've done a lot of reading and research, and they're going to repeat to me verbatim every single thing they've heard off Joe Rogan, that they are not skeptical of anything they hear from their favorite like centrist or right-wing content creators, but they are highly skeptical. And when I say skeptical, I mean that they fundamentally distrust and won't believe anything that comes from like academia or like any type of like scientific journal or whatever. I think that is an incredibly fucking frustrating thing that, like, people will call me like a simp for institutions. And to some extent, I mean, I kind of am, but I think we should be like highly skeptical of them. I think it's good, but you should understand what their purpose is, what they're for, and be skeptical of them in terms of like auditing them. And if we want like more watchdog organizations or whatever, that's good. But people assume that if you're skeptical of something, it means that you're like wholly discounting it and you don't believe in it at all. And then, but then you happen to believe,
It was very interesting because this word skepticism, I mean, 10 years ago, it was like the person would be like a Richard Dawkins or a Daniel Dennett kind. So it was like atheists, they'd be, skeptical of Islam. They'd be skeptical. They wouldn't like believe in like postmodernism or anything like that. I mean, that's also a thing where like sort of the skeptic traditionally meant like religious skeptic, but as like over time it became skeptical of like institutions. And I mean, they're like, it's like, I think people don't get is truth is hard. Like, it's like you think you could just go to like the store and like pick up some supplement, and just because some guy told you that that's gonna make your balls grow, that it's necessarily true. It's like, no, you need like scientists like sitting there doing a study and like understanding the mechanisms of how things work in order to be able to say anything, right? And it's the same thing about like deriving the truth about what happens in a foreign conflict or what's happening in government, right? You need people who will make this their full-time job and like do the painstaking work that's not always fun of like doing the reporting, bringing you the facts. They do this, sometimes with problems, but they're necessary. It's not like this guy Balaji who says journalists are going to be replaced by the blockchain. Have you seen this?
No, but anytime somebody says blockchain, I basically immediately discount anything else they say.
We're gonna have truth on the blockchain. You don't need journalists anymore. He's done these giant Twitter posts about this, and so it's just ridiculous. I mean, I've become a simp for institutions. It's like I started out like like anti-woke, like hating institutions for a lot of reasons, and then it's like I saw the alternative, and it's like this is 1,000 times worse. I'm sorry, institutions. Like you have a role to play. I've seen the alternative now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I wish people would give more. It feels even stupid to say, give more credit to mainstream media or institutions. Like, it's even if saying that, you sound fucking insane. But it's like, really? Like, should you? Like, do I really have faith in Tim Pool's fact-checking team over, like these other mainstream media orgs that are actually held to account when they get things wrong? But whatever. Okay, well.
You do this for 8 hours, is that right?
Yeah, somehow, yeah.
That's impressive, man.
I mean, I grew up playing like computer games and everything all day, so that was like 16 hours a day. So those are just screaming at people online. It's usually fun.
Yeah, I'm like 3 years older than you. I think maybe that's a little bit of a different, not that far apart, but I remember maybe the pre-internet days a little bit more. Yeah, sit there for like 8 hours. Like I get having a podcast, I get having a blog, I do those things, but streaming for 8 hours, that's incredible. I just don't know how people do it.
Do you think? Wait, final question. Do you think that January 6th was an insurrection?
Well, no, it was not. It wasn't an insurrection. I thought you were going to say it was an inside job. Insurrection. Yeah, they tried to overthrow the government. I mean, that's like what happened. They wanted to. Someone was this guy Wesley Yang was on Twitter, and he was like, "These two things are not a coup." And he's trying to sound like nonpartisan. He's like, "It's not a coup just because the Democrats anointed Kamala Harris. It's not a coup just because these people went to the Capitol on January 6th without any plan to transform the government." And I responded like, "No, they told you. They were chanting 'Hang Mike Pence.' They had a plan, and they told you literally what the plan was." And then he's like, "Oh well, it had no chance of working." I'm like, "I didn't say it was a good plan. I just said there was a plan to actually change the results of an election." So I mean, I'm with the establishment of the liberal institutions on January 6th.
Yeah, there's a thing where it's like sometimes I say like, God, I wish that this would happen just so I could see how you guys would respond. And I feel like that was one of those moments looking back, because it's like he said to do this. They marched with signs that said 1776, which refers to a very famous insurrection. They went to the Capitol building. They delayed. They were there protesting the vote. And then every time you argue against somebody about it, their arguments aren't actually arguing against it being an insurrection. They're arguing to justify the insurrection. It's like, don't you agree that it was an insurrection? Like, no, the vote wasn't even real. They faked the vote. And it's like, okay, that's a reason to insurrect against them then, right? Like,
Well,
yeah.
maybe you're dealing with different kinds of people. So yeah, there's some who will say that. There are some who will just say it wasn't a big deal. It
Yeah.
was just like,
Only
they
one
were
person
just
got
like, they
killed.
got
Yeah.
a, I mean, they got a little rowdy. We have riots sometimes. BLM killed many more people,
Hmm.
and so forth. Yeah, I think that trying to overthrow the election that you didn't win. Like, I'm not like a big guy who's like, oh, everything is democratic norms, democratic. Like, people overuse that,
Sure.
but like losing an election and then just leaving, like that's the one thing. Like, if there's just one thing that's like a norm we all agree on, it has to be that. And how you obfuscate this, I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you ever see me tweet anything you disagree with, or if anything crazy comes up, or if you ever want to chat again, you can always just shoot me a DM, and I can always drag around. We don't have to do like a complicated scheduling thing. Usually we do that for real life shows, but if you ever DM me, you can always just hop on and
Oh,
chat.
I can just hop in.
Yeah, basically, yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay, cool. All right, I enjoyed it, Destiny, man. Great talking to you.
yeah. You can call me Steven also. I used to be a pro gamer, so that's like my gaming name,
All
and I
right,
had the branding for it. And then I started doing politics like 8 years ago, and it's yeah.
gotcha. I didn't know if it was. I didn't know how the streamer. I thought it might be like a stage name that you never break face. I knew you
No,
were Steve.
absolutely not. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for chatting.
Till
Bye.
next time. Bye.
Fucking nerd.